finale of Season 2 of Yellowjackets was a wild ride from start to finish, with more than one literal heart-stopping moments. One of the moments that stood out the most was not from one of the amazing women on the cast, but actually from Travis. Travis had a lot to process in a short amount of time, while the ravenous girls hovered near his brother's fresh corpse, awaiting their meal. Travis was forced to come to terms with the reality of the situation, and a gruesome pep talk from Van really helped seal the deal. He allowed his brother to save his life and partook in the eating of Javi's body. Shauna presented Javi's butchered body parts to Travis for the honor of the first selection. Begrudgingly, Travis accepted the purpose behind his brother's death, and before placing Javi's heart in the frying pan, he took a bite of the raw and bloody organ. Though it was a gruesome sight, there is a spiritual purpose behind the eating of the raw heart, and we're going to discuss this idea here today. There were many examples of cannibalism throughout Season 2 of Yellowjackets. Whether it was a means of survival, a fever dream to disassociate, or just plain delusions, many different forms of human cannibalism were explored throughout this season. All of the examples of cannibalism that were shown in Yellowjackets were connected to various ritualistic and religious experiences, and we are going to explore these different forms of human consumption in this video. Whether it was Shauna and her cannibalistic sacrament, the Greco-Roman inspired Bacchanal Scene, or even Jackie's old belt soup, there was a variety of inspiration, both historical and mythological, behind each of these scenes. So, let's dig in. There are many forms of cannibalism. Endocannibalism is the act of consuming someone from within your tribe or community, typically done in an effort to take on the qualities or attributes of a person as part of a grieving process. Mortuary cannibalism falls under this category, which is the consumption of only small amounts of a corpse's body substances, which typically were ingested by a dead person's consanguineal kin. Exocannibalism is the act of consuming someone from outside of your community, often as an act to cause fear in enemies or in celebration of victory against a rival tribe. Survival cannibalism is done for that reason, to survive, but not to be confused with nutritional cannibalism, where there is no form of ritual or spiritual purpose. Many forms of cannibalism can be fueled by the belief that eating a person's flesh or internal organs will endow the cannibal with some of the characteristics of the deceased. Clearly, the survivors in Yellowjackets choose this act out of desperation and necessity to survive, but each of the deceased have drastically different effects on the cannibal based on their relationship. Consuming Jackie's body had a much different psychological effect on Shauna than Travis consuming Javi's body did, and we are going to explore these ideas. Shauna's relationship with Jackie was very complicated, and this left behind so much guilt after her unexpected death in Season 1. Shauna kept Jackie's frozen body in the meat shed as her own personal comfort corpse while she processed her trauma along with her own changing body and hormones as the baby grew inside her. She spent 2 whole months deluding herself about Jackie, and Jackie even called her out, saying she was only there because Shauna was holding on to her. She did even more than that when Shauna accidentally broke Jackie's ear off and hid the ear in her pocket. Shauna confessed her indiscretions to Jackie's dead body, telling her the truth of how she had pursued Jackie's boyfriend Jeff, the father of her baby. Going back to the pilot episode, there was a moment when Jackie reminded Shauna about the time she had tried becoming Catholic, and Shauna said she liked the saints because they were all so tragic. Shauna is surrounded by Catholic imagery, and we see more of this in her dream state with her baby, where she is dressed in the blue headdress and red garb of Mother Mary. Jackie's ear represents even more Catholic imagery. Shauna makes confession to the ear, and when she finally eats Jackie's ear, it is a parallel to the Eucharist, a Holy Communion to commemorate the time before the Last Supper. There is a distinct change from innocence to corruption after the group consumes Jackie's body, a parallel to the Garden of Eden before and after eating the forbidden fruit. Shauna eating Jackie's ear is representative of the body of Christ, consumed as part of Catholic ritual or Mass. The bread which represents the body of Christ was portrayed by Jackie's ear, to which Shauna made her confession and consumed in an act of commemoration and personal ritual. By the time the Yellowjackets make the choice to consume Jackie's body, they are all agitated and hungry. Taissa forces Shauna to go forward with burning Jackie's body on a funeral pyre after she discovers Shauna has been putting makeup on Jackie's corpse. But the wilderness intervened, dumping a pile of snow onto the pyre and slowly cooking Jackie's body rather than burning it away. The starving group smelled the cooked flesh and could not stop themselves. They are drawn like moths to the flame. In this instance, they leave it to Shauna to take the first bite, knowing she was the closest to and most protective over Jackie. Once the first taste is taken, the hungry survivors feast on her flesh, disassociating and envisioning a lavish feast with all the fine foods they can dream of. They put themselves in the Greco-Roman world of the wilderness god Dionysus, who smiles upon their wickedness. The body of Jackie, representing a more holy sacrament, evolves into further mythology when the rest of the group make the choice to eat her in episode 2 in the Bacchanal Scene. This was based on the Greco-Roman myth of the Bacchae, written by Euripides and based on Dionysian ritual. The female worshippers of Dionysus, the Maenads, perform sparagmos and homophagia, which are the acts of tearing a body apart and consumption of the raw flesh, typically in a Dionysian context. Dionysus is called homophagos, which translates to raw eater, and worshippers left him offerings of raw meat. The Maenads were frenzied and frolicked through the forest, bringing milk and wine from the ground with their thyrsus. However, these women were also dangerously ecstatic and were known for tearing apart a bull, children, and the king of Thebes, who was also the son of the leader of the Maenads. This scene marked a distinct change from innocence to corruption. The Bacchae blurs the line between worship and mania, and this is something we see in Yellowjackets as well. The group of teenagers who land in the wilderness make a dark descent in their efforts to survive another day, and by eating Jackie's body, they cross a line in the darkness they cannot return from. However, here we begin to explore the idea that there is a blessing in the horror of cannibalism. Jackie saved their lives. She fed Shauna's baby growing inside her, proving Jackie to be a mother to Shauna and to her child, a sacrifice so the others may live on.
Shauna.
And though Jackie provided sustenance to Shauna and to her baby, that could not save her in childbirth. Shauna experienced a perilous labor with no medical help, and the loss of blood caused her to lose consciousness for a time. In her dream state, Shauna experienced many visuals and emotions. She shared some very precious moments with her baby, a closeness she would never get to experience in real life. However, she also had a horrific moment in her dream when she awoke and her baby was gone. She weakly stumbled out of the room, only to find her group of friends cannibalizing her baby and covered in blood. This was the moment that Shauna regained consciousness, only to learn that her baby had not survived childbirth. The scene of the baby being torn apart and eaten comes from another tale of Dionysus in his first incarnation. The Orphic Hymns tell the story of Zagreus, who was the son of Zeus and Persephone. Zagreus was beloved by Zeus, and he wished to name him his heir, which enraged his wife Hera. She convinced the Titans to kill the child, so they tricked him with a mirror and lured him away, then performing sparagmos, ripping him limb from limb. They cooked his body and consumed it, but not before Athena, who had been in on the plot, rescued his heart from being eaten. She returned the heart to Zeus, who was so angry he struck down the Titans with his lightning bolts and brought the great flood on Earth. From the ashes and fragments of the Titans comes the origins of humanity, but our souls come from the heart of Zagreus, a pure light. Zagreus' heart was taken to the underworld, and his next incarnation on Earth was as Dionysus. The biggest tragedy about Shauna's dreams and visions are the ultimate and utter confusion that she must carry about her dream. Shauna lost her child, and so those few precious moments she had in her dream state were all the time she had with her baby, and she will not let go of those memories for anything in the world. However, on that note, the vision of the group cannibalizing her child was haunting, and unfortunately, extremely difficult to differentiate. Shauna had those few special moments with her child, and she must believe that they were real, that she got that precious time with her baby. But by believing that, she is also forced to believe that the scene of her friends was also real. If she convinces herself that it was not real and just a dream, she admits to herself that the memories she has of her baby are also not real. It is so utterly tragic and tormenting. Now, before we move on to Javi, I want to share a passage from a book called Kore by Karl Kerényi. This is an amazing book that has given a ton of insight into some of the ritualistic aspects of Yellowjackets, and I highly recommend you all to check it out. Kore was the maiden name for Persephone. Now, Jackie had some major Persephone overtones to her storyline, and as I'm sure you all know, Persephone is the queen of the underworld, wife of Hades, and daughter of Demeter. Shauna definitely embodies the earth mother grain goddess Demeter, and since her loss of the baby, she has entered into her Brimo state, Demeter Arenes, a volatile form of the goddess who is enraged at the loss of her daughter. All of Shauna's crowns and now her brown head wrap indicate her position as an initiate into the Demeter Persephone ceremonies. The head wrap and covering of her eyes played a huge part in the initiations of the Eleusinian Mysteries, which were the largest religious festivals in ancient Greece. The head of the initiand was wrapped in darkness, just as in antiquity, brides and those vowed to the underworld were veiled. The Greek word for to initiate means to close and is used for eyes and mouth alike. The initiate remained passive, but the closing of the eyes and the entry into darkness is something active. The Greek word for initiate is a nomen agentis. The passivity of Persephone, of the bride, the maiden doomed to die, is re-experienced by means of an inner act, if only an act of surrender. Our sources speak of an imitation of Dionysian happenings. As a sacrificial victim and one who is doomed, Dionysus is the male counterpart of Persephone. Omophagia, the act of eating raw flesh, was the focus of the Dionysian mysteries and a component of the Orphic ceremonies. In its beginning, Orphism was influenced by the Eleusinian mysteries and adopted stories from other mythologies as its own. The worshippers of Zagreus may have engaged in omophagia as an initiation rite. When Shauna the butcher prepares Javi's body for consumption, she does something to distinguish the act as ritualistic when she covers her eyes, using only her hands to feel for where to cut. Perhaps this was simply because Shauna had yet to butcher a human, or because she cared for Javi, but either way, this was her own way to familiarize herself with the human form. She also asked the others to leave, and she performed this task alone. This is very similar to the initiations at Eleusis. The religion itself was about a three-part descent into the underworld: the descent, the search, and the ascent. And the religion is about purifying and preparation for the afterlife. The beautiful part of it is that it is designed around making peace with death, whether it is your own death or the death and loss of a loved one. We are definitely going to go into more detail on these mysteries and how they relate to Yellowjackets in another video, so keep an eye out for that. And finally, Travis went on an emotional roller coaster in a short amount of time when he saw Nat walk back into camp after she had drawn the Queen of Hearts card, followed by his brother's lifeless body carried on a rack of rebar moments later. The last thing anyone expected from the ritual and hunt would be for Javi's life to be forfeit. However, Van had a very good point when she persuaded Travis to accept his brother's sacrifice and to allow Javi to save his life. Once Shauna had butchered his body, she offered Travis the best cut, the heart. Travis picked up his brother's heart, but before placing it in the hot frying pan, he took a bite from the raw organ. What is so fascinating about this act is that Travis operates from instinct, from some ancient ancestral memory. Something drove him to take the bite of the heart, going back to the idea that it's very unlikely that Travis and Javi were exposed to ideas like mortuary cannibalism or sacred geometry. These are their natural instincts in action. Travis took the bite to honor his brother, but also to absorb something of him. By eating the raw heart, Travis believes he will absorb some of Javi's soul and that he will be endowed with his characteristics and wisdom. You know what they say, you are what you eat. It is worth mentioning that Javi brought the Queen of Hearts card back to the cabin with him, so he was actually the one who drew the Queen card first. This adds an additional layer to Travis eating his heart. There is a ritual of sin eating where, similarly to mortuary cannibalism, a person eats a symbolic meal, though typically not human flesh, to spiritually take on the sins of another person in order to spiritually cleanse them for the afterlife. Jesus of Nazarene is often seen as a sin eater for giving his life to cleanse the world of its sins and wickedness. This person carries the sins of all whom they have eaten sins for, and they may be shunned for this reason. We can see a reflection of this idea in both Javi and Jackie, where they died so the others may live, but both were also shunned or exiled for a time before their death. Javi's silence after his return may lead us to believe that he had seen some things, such as the survivors cannibalizing Jackie's body, for example. This may be why he did not return sooner, or why his friend advised him not to return at all. So there is this idea that Javi's death was a symbolic cleansing for the group. In fact, they chose a new leader after he is consumed. Javi carries some very Christ-like attributes, and the eating of his heart is definitely symbolic of both sin eating and mortuary cannibalism, which can be a bit contradictory by definition. If Javi had sin eaten for the group, and he carries those sins in him, then by Travis consuming his heart and taking on Javi's attributes, he may have unintentionally become the sin eater, carrying the sins of the group. I might be thinking too far into this, but it seems relevant considering how adult Travis was haunted by the wilderness. I have theorized that in the moments where Nat and Travis were using and attempting to tap into their wilderness by touching death, that it was for a purpose. Travis just wanted to talk to it so that he could make it go away. In episode 2, when Nat has a quick flashback of being revived, Travis is in the doorway and looks to be speaking to someone, similarly to when Lottie saw Laura Lee in the moment that Travis was dying. They used those liminal states to access the wilderness, and it may be that Travis was able to speak to Javi in those moments. That is why he was willing to go to such extremes. It was not just death or the wilderness he was speaking to, but his brother, Javi. One last thing while we're on this note is when Nat is chosen as their new leader and each person steps up to bow to her, Travis does something slightly different. He faces Nat and he takes her hand and places it over his heart. Nat is the Queen of Hearts and Travis's heart is broken, but he now has a piece of Javi's heart within him to purify and heal him. We can see why Javi always haunted both Nat and Travis and their matters of the heart. This may be exactly why Travis told Lottie that Nat couldn't help with this when he tried to touch the darkness one last time. The reasons behind why the Yellowjackets resort to cannibalism has always been the focal point of this entire story. We have always known they will, but the show answers the why. The different forms of cannibalism and the desperation of these young survivors leads us down a dark descent of their experiences. However, it is a unique idea to explore in depth, and Yellowjackets taps into ancient myth and history to bring these scenes a new perspective and creative energy. We have all witnessed entertainment with people running for their lives from mindless, brain-consuming zombies, but Yellowjackets brings this to us through a more realistic lens, even through all the disassociation. The human survival experience can teach us a lot, and learning more about this ancient custom, which is not always in a gruesome light, is actually quite fascinating. But those are just my thoughts, so let me know yours in the comments below. And if you like this video, hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And consider joining my Patreon or channel memberships to help support the channel. Join me each week for the Monday Morning Murder Podcast, discussing all the details in Yellowjackets and much more. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!